The storm clouds gathered over Montana territory like an ominous shroud, and Sarah Fletcher knew she had maybe an hour before the deluge would begin, as she stumbled along the dusty road that led toward what she hoped would be civilization. Her swollen belly made every step harder than the last, and the weight of desperation pressed down on her shoulders almost as heavily as the child she carried. She had been walking for 3 days since the wagon train abandoned her, since they discovered her condition and the absence of any husband to claim responsibility, since the women had whispered and the men had looked away in shame on her behalf. It was August of 1876, and the Montana Territory was still wild enough that a woman alone was vulnerable in ways that made her stomach clench with fear. But a pregnant woman alone, with no resources and no family, was practically a ghost already. Sarah pressed one hand to her lower back and kept moving forward because stopping meant dying, and she refused to let her baby die before it even had a chance to draw breath. The ranch appeared like a mirage at first, shimmering in the heat that preceded the storm. Split-rail fences stretched across rolling grassland where cattle grazed, their rust-colored hides a blur in her exhausted vision. A sturdy house built of timber and stone sat at the heart of the property, smoke rising from its chimney despite the summer heat. Nearby stood a barn that looked well-maintained, and several smaller outbuildings that spoke of a prosperous operation. Sarah's throat was so dry she could barely swallow, but she forced herself to walk faster, to cover the distance between the road and that house before her legs gave out entirely. She had tried 3 other places over the past week, and each time she had been turned away with varying degrees of kindness or cruelty. Once, dogs had been set on her. Another time, a woman had thrown a bucket of wash water at her feet and told her to keep her sin away from decent folk. She made it to the porch steps before her knees buckled. The world tilted sideways and she grabbed for the railing, missing it, feeling herself start to fall. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground, and she found herself looking up into the most striking pair of blue eyes she had ever seen. "Easy now," a deep voice said, and she was lifted as though she weighed nothing at all, carried up the steps and through a doorway into blessed shade. "When did you last eat?" Sarah tried to answer, but her tongue felt thick and useless in her mouth. The man carrying her had dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, sun-bronzed skin that spoke of long days outdoors, and a face that was handsome in a rough-hewn way. He looked to be perhaps 28 or 30, old enough to have the bearing of someone who knew his place in the world. He set her down on a sofa in a simply furnished parlor and disappeared, returning moments later with a cup of water. Sarah's hands shook as she took it, and he steadied them with his own, helping her drink slowly. "Not too fast," he cautioned. "You will make yourself sick." When she had drained half the cup, he pulled it away gently and studied her face. Sarah knew what he was seeing. A woman of 23 with brown hair that had once been carefully pinned but now straggled around her shoulders, a sunburned face streaked with trail dust, and a body that was clearly very pregnant beneath a torn and filthy dress. "I am sorry," Sarah whispered, finding her voice at last. "I am so sorry to impose on you, sir. I just need a moment to rest, and then I will be on my way." The man's expression shifted to something that might have been anger, but Sarah realized after a moment that it was not directed at her. "You are not going anywhere in your condition. When did you last have a proper meal?" "I do not know," Sarah admitted. 3 days, maybe 4. He stood abruptly and walked toward what she assumed was the kitchen. Sarah heard the clatter of pots and the sound of a fire being stoked. She should leave, she thought. She should get up and walk out before he came to his senses and threw her out himself. But her body would not cooperate, and exhaustion dragged at her like an anchor. The man returned with a plate of cold beef, bread and cheese. Eat this slowly, he instructed. I am making soup, but this will help for now. Sarah took the plate with trembling hands. Why are you helping me? He settled into a chair across from her, his long legs stretched out in front of him. My name is Benjamin Kane. This is my ranch, and I do not turn away people in need. Now eat, and then you can tell me how you came to be walking alone on a road in the middle of nowhere while carrying a child. The food was the best thing Sarah had ever tasted, though she knew that was just her hunger talking. She forced herself to eat slowly as instructed, taking small bites and chewing carefully. Benjamin Kane watched her with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable, but somehow did not. I was with a wagon train heading to Virginia City, Sarah explained between bites. When they discovered my condition, they told me I could not continue with them. They said I was a bad influence on the other women and children. And the father? Benjamin asked quietly, Sarah's hand stilled on the plate. This was always the question that brought judgment raining down. Dead, she said, which was not entirely a lie. He died before we could be married. She waited for the condemnation, the lecture about morality and sin. Instead, Benjamin simply nodded. And your family? Gone. My parents died of fever 2 years ago. I have a brother somewhere in California, but I have not heard from him in over a year. I thought if I could get to Virginia City, I might find work, make a life for myself and the baby. She laughed bitterly. I was foolish. You were hopeful, Benjamin corrected. There is a difference. He rose and returned to the kitchen, coming back with a bowl of hot soup that smelled of beef and vegetables. Sarah set aside the plate and accepted the bowl, wrapping her hands around its warmth despite the summer heat. The first spoonful nearly made her weep with relief. You can stay here, Benjamin said suddenly. At least until after the baby is born. Longer if you need to. Sarah stared at him. I do not understand. You do not know me. I could be anyone, anything. You are a woman in trouble who needs help, Benjamin replied simply. That is all I need to know. People will talk, Sarah warned. They will say terrible things about both of us. Benjamin's jaw tightened. Let them talk. I stopped caring about gossip a long time ago. But why? Sarah pressed. Why would you risk your reputation for a stranger? He was silent for a long moment, his blue eyes distant. 5 years ago, my sister found herself in a situation similar to yours. She came to me for help, but I was young and stupid and worried about what people would think. I sent her away with some money and told her to handle it somewhere else. He paused, and Sarah saw genuine pain cross his features. She died in childbirth in some filthy boarding house in Butte, alone. The baby died too. I am so sorry, Sarah whispered. I swore that day that I would never turn away someone in need again, Benjamin continued. That I would never let concern for my own reputation matter more than doing what was right. So you see, you are not imposing on me. You are giving me a chance to make amends. Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks, the first she had allowed herself to cry since the wagon train had cast her out. I do not know how to thank you. Benjamin stood and took the empty bowl from her hands. You can thank me by resting and taking care of yourself and that baby. There is a bedroom upstairs that was my sister's. It has been empty for 5 years, and I think she would be glad to know it was being used by someone who needed it. He helped Sarah to her feet and guided her up a narrow staircase to a small but clean bedroom with a window that looked out over the grazing land. The bed had a thick mattress and real pillows, and there was a washstand with a basin and pitcher. I will bring up water for washing, Benjamin said. Rest now. We can talk more when you wake up. Sarah wanted to protest, to insist that she needed to earn her keep somehow, but exhaustion won. She sank onto the bed and was asleep before Benjamin had even left the room. When she woke, the storm had broken and rain hammered against the window in sheets. The room was dark except for a lamp burning low on the bedside table. Sarah pushed herself upright with difficulty, her back aching and her baby shifting restlessly inside her. She had slept hard and dreamlessly, the sleep of complete exhaustion, and she felt more human than she had in weeks. Someone had left a clean dress draped over the chair by the washstand, along with fresh undergarments and a hairbrush. The pitcher was filled with water, and there was a bar of soap that smelled faintly of lavender. Sarah stood slowly, testing her legs, and made her way to the washstand. The process of washing and changing clothes took far longer than it should have, her pregnant belly making even simple movements awkward. But when she was done, she felt transformed. The dress was simple calico in a dark blue that had probably belonged to Benjamin's sister. It fit reasonably well, clearly made for a woman of similar height, and Sarah sent up a silent prayer of thanks for this small kindness. She brushed out her hair and braided it into a simple plait, then made her way carefully down the stairs. The smell of cooking food drew her toward the kitchen, where she found Benjamin standing over the stove stirring something in a large pot. "I hope you do not mind," Sarah said from the doorway. "I found the dress and thought—" "It is yours," Benjamin said without turning around. "Everything in that room is yours for as long as you need it. How are you feeling?" "Better than I have in weeks," Sarah admitted. She moved into the kitchen and looked around. It was clean and well organized, with evidence of someone who knew their way around cooking. "Can I help with anything?" Benjamin finally turned to look at her, and something flickered across his face too quickly for her to identify. "You should be resting." "I have been resting," Sarah countered. "I slept for hours. Please let me help. I need to feel useful." He studied her for a moment, then nodded toward a loaf of bread on the counter. "You can slice that if you like, and there is butter in the cold cellar if you want to fetch it." They worked in companionable silence, Sarah moving slowly but steadily. The cold cellar was accessed through a door in the kitchen floor, and she carefully descended the ladder to retrieve the butter from a shelf lined with jars of preserves and wheels of cheese. When she climbed back up, Benjamin was ladling stew into bowls. They ate at a simple wooden table, the rain continuing to pound outside. Sarah had not realized how starved she had been for simple human company until now, sitting across from this man who had shown her nothing but kindness. "How long have you had this ranch?" she asked. "My father built it 20 years ago," Benjamin replied. "I was 10 when we came out here from Missouri. It was just him and me and my sister then. My mother had died the year before. That must have been hard, starting over in such a wild place." Benjamin nodded. "It was. But my father was determined to make something of himself, and he did. By the time he died 8 years ago, this was one of the best cattle operations in the territory. He left it to me, and I have tried to build on what he started." "You have no other family?" Sarah asked. "None that matter," Benjamin said. "An uncle back in Missouri who I have not spoken to in years. A few cousins scattered here and there. After my sister died, I realized that family is not always about blood. The men who work for me, they are family in their own way." "How many men work here?" "Right now, just 2. Tom Ridgway and Jack Harrison. They are both good men, reliable. They have been with me for 3 years now. They are out checking fence lines today, but they should be back tomorrow. I will introduce you then." Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety. "What will you tell them about me?" Benjamin met her eyes steadily. "The truth, if that is all right with you. That you are staying here until after the baby comes, and that anyone who has a problem with that can find work elsewhere." "You would fire men over me." "I would fire men who could not show basic human decency," Benjamin corrected. "But I do not think it will come to that. Tom and Jack are good people." After dinner, Sarah insisted on washing the dishes despite Benjamin's protests. Her back ached and her feet were swollen, but the simple domestic task felt grounding after so many weeks of uncertainty. Benjamin dried the dishes as she washed them, and Sarah found herself oddly comfortable in his presence. "When is the baby due?" he asked as they worked. "Late October, I think." "Maybe early November. It is hard to know for certain. We will need to find a midwife," Benjamin said. "There is a woman in Montana City about 15 miles from here, Mrs. Anderson. She has delivered half the babies in the territory." "I have no money to pay her," Sarah admitted quietly. "That is my concern, not yours," Benjamin replied firmly. "I told you that you could stay here, and that means making sure you and the baby are properly cared for." Sarah set down the plate she had been washing and turned to face him. "Why are you really doing this? And please, do not say it is just about your sister. You are risking so much for someone you do not even know." Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, his hand stilling on the dish towel. "Maybe I am tired of living alone," he said finally. "Maybe I am tired of coming home to an empty house and eating dinner by myself every night. Maybe helping you is also helping me." The honesty in his words struck something deep in Sarah's chest. "I understand that," she said softly. "Being alone." Over the following days, a routine developed. Sarah woke each morning to find Benjamin already up and working, and she would make breakfast for them both. He was unfailingly kind but also gave her space, seeming to understand that she needed time to adjust to her new circumstances. The bedroom upstairs became her sanctuary, a place where she could rest and feel safe for the first time in months. Tom Ridgway and Jack Harrison returned on the third day, and Benjamin introduced Sarah as a woman who would be staying at the ranch for a while. Both men tipped their hats respectfully, and if they had questions about her condition, they kept them to themselves. Tom was older, maybe 50, with gray streaking his beard and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. Jack was younger, perhaps 25, with sandy hair and an easy smile. "Nice to have a woman around the place again," Tom said as they sat down to the midday meal Sarah had prepared. "Benjamin's cooking is edible, but just barely." "I heard that," Benjamin called from where he was washing up at the pump outside. Sarah found herself laughing, the sound strange to her own ears. When had she last laughed? She could not remember. The days turned into a week, then two. August gave way to September, and the heat began to ease slightly. Sarah's belly grew larger, and Benjamin converted one of the downstairs rooms into a bedroom for her so she would not have to navigate the stairs. He did it without fanfare, simply moving the furniture one afternoon while she was resting. "This is too much," Sarah protested when she saw what he had done. "It is practical," Benjamin countered. "In another month, those stairs are going to be difficult for you. This way, everything you need is on one level." Sarah wanted to argue, but the relief of not having to climb stairs was too great. Besides, she was beginning to understand that Benjamin Kane was a man who showed care through actions rather than words. He had already arranged for Mrs. Anderson to visit once a month to check on Sarah and the baby. He made sure there was always food that would settle her increasingly temperamental stomach. He never asked questions about her past beyond what she volunteered, and Sarah found herself volunteering more as the weeks passed. She told him about growing up in Ohio, about her parents' small farm and how happy they had been despite having little. She told him about meeting Robert, about how he had courted her with poetry and promises, about how he had convinced her that they would marry as soon as they reached Oregon, where his uncle supposedly had land and money. "He died of cholera 3 weeks into the journey," Sarah said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I did not realize I was pregnant until after he was gone. By then, there was no way to prove we had intended to marry, No way to make people believe that I was not just a woman of loose morals. What people believe does not change who you are, Benjamin said quietly. But it changes how they treat you, Sarah replied. It changes everything. Benjamin turned to look at her, his blue eyes serious. You will never have to beg for shelter again, Sarah, not while I am alive. I want you to know that. Whatever happens, you and the baby have a home here for as long as you want it. The words should have been comforting, but they terrified her. Sarah had learned not to trust promises, not to believe in security. Everything could be taken away in an instant. But looking at Benjamin's face, at the sincerity there, she wanted desperately to believe him. "Thank you," she whispered. As September advanced, Sarah found herself settling into life on the ranch in ways she had not expected. She took over most of the cooking, which the men appreciated greatly. She mended their clothes and organized the chaotic pantry. She planted a small herb garden near the kitchen door, even though it was late in the season. These small acts of domesticity gave her purpose and made her feel less like a burden. But it was her growing friendship with Benjamin that surprised her most. They talked for hours in the evenings about everything and nothing. He told her about his dreams of expanding the ranch, of building a legacy that would outlast him. She told him about her love of reading, and he brought her books from the small collection his sister had left behind. One night in late September, Sarah woke to severe cramping. For a terrifying moment, she thought the baby was coming early, but the pain eased after a few minutes. Still, it left her shaken and unable to fall back asleep. She made her way to the kitchen, thinking a cup of warm milk might help. Benjamin was already there, sitting at the table with paperwork spread in front of him. He looked up when she entered, and concern immediately crossed his face. "What is wrong?" "Nothing, just some cramping," Sarah assured him. "It passed. I just wanted something warm to drink." Benjamin stood immediately and guided her to a chair. "Sit. I will make the milk." They sat together in the quiet kitchen, the lamp casting a warm glow. Sarah cradled the cup of milk in her hands and watched Benjamin pretend to work on his paperwork while actually watching her to make sure she was all right. "You are going to be a good father someday," she said without thinking. Benjamin's head snapped up. "What makes you say that?" "The way you care," Sarah replied simply. "Not everyone knows how to do that." "I never thought much about having children," Benjamin admitted. "After what happened to my sister, after seeing what she went through, it scared me." The idea of caring that much about someone, of being responsible for a life. "You are responsible for me right now," Sarah pointed out. "That is different. You are a grown woman who can make her own choices. A child is helpless, dependent on you for everything. What if I fail?" Sarah set down her cup and reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. The gesture surprised them both, but she did not pull away. "You would not fail. I have seen how you are with the cattle, with your men, with me. You have a good heart, Benjamin Kane." He turned his hand over so their palms were touching, his larger hand engulfing hers. "You have a good heart too, Sarah Fletcher. Do not let anyone ever tell you otherwise." They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined across the table, something unspoken but powerful building between them. Finally, Sarah pulled away, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the moment. "I should try to sleep," she said, standing carefully. Benjamin stood as well. "Call if you need anything. I am a light sleeper." Sarah made her way back to her room, her heart beating faster than the mild exertion warranted. She lay in bed, one hand on her swollen belly, and admitted to herself what she had been trying to ignore for weeks. She was falling in love with Benjamin Kane. The realization should have terrified her. She was pregnant with another man's child, a woman with nothing to offer and a reputation that was ruined. Benjamin deserved better than someone like her, but her heart did not seem to care about logic or propriety. Every kind word, every gentle gesture, every moment of quiet companionship had woven itself into her being until she could not imagine her life without him in it. But loving someone and being loved in return were two different things, Sarah reminded herself. Benjamin was a good man doing a charitable act. She could not mistake kindness for affection, safety for love. That way lay heartbreak, and she had already had enough heartbreak to last a lifetime. October arrived with crisp mornings and the first hints of gold in the cottonwood leaves. Sarah was enormous now, her belly so large she could barely see her feet. Mrs. Anderson visited and pronounced both mother and baby healthy, though she warned that the birth could come at any time. "You have done well caring for her," Mrs. Anderson told Benjamin as Sarah rested in her room. Not many men would have taken in a woman in her condition. "She needed help," Benjamin replied simply. Mrs. Anderson gave him a shrewd look. "She is a good woman, that one. Been through more than most could handle. You could do worse." "I am just giving her a place to stay," Benjamin protested. "If you say so," Mrs. Anderson replied, but her tone suggested she did not believe him for a moment. After she left, Benjamin found himself thinking about her words. He had been trying not to examine his feelings too closely, but they were becoming impossible to ignore. Somewhere along the way, Sarah had stopped being a woman he was helping and had become the person he most wanted to see each morning, the voice he most wanted to hear each evening. He loved the way she hummed while cooking, loved how she had reorganized his chaotic kitchen into something functional. He loved her quiet strength, the way she never complained despite obvious discomfort. He loved her laugh, which came more frequently now, and the way her eyes lit up when she talked about books. But she was pregnant with another man's child, a woman who had been through hell, and the last thing she probably wanted was another man making demands on her. So Benjamin kept his feelings locked away and told himself that friendship was enough. The first week of October brought unseasonably warm weather, and Sarah spent an afternoon sitting on the porch shelling peas. Benjamin was working on repairing a section of fence nearby, close enough that they could talk. "Tell me about Robert," he said suddenly, then immediately wished he could take the words back, but Sarah did not seem upset by the question. "What do you want to know?" "Whatever you want to tell me." Sarah was quiet for a moment, her hands moving mechanically through the peas. "He was handsome and charming and full of dreams. He made me feel special, like I was the only woman in the world who mattered. My parents did not approve of him, thought he was too much talk and not enough action. They were probably right. Did you love him?" "I thought I did," Sarah said slowly. "But now I am not sure I knew what love really was. I was young and foolish and wanted adventure. Robert offered that. Looking back, I am not sure we would have been happy together even if he had lived. We wanted such different things." "What do you want?" Benjamin asked. Sarah looked out across the grassland, one hand absently rubbing her belly. "Safety, stability, a place to belong. I know that sounds boring compared to adventure, but I have had enough adventure to last a lifetime. I want to watch my child grow up without fear. I want to make a home and know that it will not be taken away. I want simple things, Benjamin, quiet things." "Those are not boring things," Benjamin said firmly. "Those are important things." Their eyes met and held, and Sarah felt that pull again, that magnetic draw toward this man who had shown her nothing but kindness. She looked away first, afraid of what he might see in her face. That night, Sarah woke to a different kind of pain. This was not cramping, but a deep, rolling contraction that took her breath away. She waited, hoping it would pass, but it came again 10 minutes later, then again. She made her way slowly to Benjamin's bedroom and knocked softly on the door. He answered immediately, his hair tousled from sleep, pulling on a shirt. "It is time," Sarah said simply. Benjamin's face went pale, then determined. All right, all right. Let me get you settled and then I will ride for Mrs. Anderson. It is the middle of the night, Sarah protested. The ride there and back will take hours. Then I better leave now, Benjamin replied. He helped Sarah back to her room and made sure she was comfortable. Tom and Jack are in the bunkhouse. I will wake them before I go. You will not be alone. Sarah grabbed his hand as another contraction hit. Benjamin knelt beside the bed and let her squeeze his hand until the pain passed. I am frightened, she whispered. I know, Benjamin replied gently. But you are the strongest person I have ever met, Sarah Fletcher. You are going to be fine, and so is your baby. He kissed her forehead quickly, the gesture so tender it brought tears to her eyes, and then he was gone. Sarah heard him moving quickly through the house, heard voices outside as he woke Tom and Jack, heard the thunder of hooves as he rode away into the darkness. Tom appeared in her doorway, looking uncomfortable but determined. I have sent Jack to heat water and gather clean linens. Is there anything you need? Just stay nearby, Sarah said. Please. I know this is not proper, but I do not want to be alone. You will not be alone, Tom promised. He dragged a chair into the hallway just outside her door and settled into it. I will be right here. The next hours were a blur of pain and fear. The contractions came faster and harder, and Sarah tried to remember everything her mother had told her about childbirth before she died. Jack brought water and linens, then retreated quickly, his face red. Tom remained steadfast in the hallway, calling encouragement through the door. Dawn was breaking when Sarah heard hoofbeats again, and then Mrs. Anderson was there, taking charge with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this 100 times before. Let us see what we have here, she said, examining Sarah quickly. You are doing well, dear. The baby will be here soon. Where is Benjamin? Sarah gasped between contractions. Right here, his voice came from the hallway. Mrs. Anderson said I had to stay out here, but I am not going anywhere. Knowing he was close gave Sarah strength she did not know she had. She focused on Mrs. Anderson's voice, on the woman's steady instructions, and pushed when she was told to push. Finally, as the sun rose fully over the Montana grassland, a thin wail filled the room. Sarah collapsed back against the pillows, tears streaming down her face as Mrs. Anderson cleaned the baby and wrapped it in a soft blanket. A boy, the midwife announced, placing the tiny bundle in Sarah's arms. A healthy, strong boy. Sarah looked down at her son's red, wrinkled face and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. He was perfect. He was hers. He was the future she had fought so hard to protect. Can Benjamin come in? She asked Mrs. Anderson. The older woman smiled. Of course, dear. Benjamin appeared in the doorway, his face anxious. When he saw Sarah holding the baby, relief washed over his features. He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the infant. He is beautiful, Benjamin said softly. What will you name him? Sarah had been thinking about this for weeks. She wanted a name that meant something, that would give her son strength. Samuel, she said. It means God has heard, because someone heard me when I was begging for shelter. Benjamin's eyes met hers, bright with emotion. Samuel Fletcher, it is a good name. Samuel Fletcher Kane, Sarah corrected softly, watching his face. Benjamin went very still. Sarah, you have given us a home, she said, given us a future. If you are willing, I would like my son to carry your name. You do not have to do that, Benjamin said, but his voice was rough with feeling. I want to, Sarah replied. You are the best man I have ever known, Benjamin Kane. If Samuel grows up to be half the man you are, I will count myself blessed. Mrs. Anderson cleared her throat tactfully. I will give you two some privacy. Sarah needs to rest, but a few minutes will not hurt. She bustled out, closing the door behind her. Benjamin sank into the chair beside the bed, his eyes still on the baby. Can I hold him? he asked. Sarah carefully transferred the tiny bundle into Benjamin's large, capable hands. He held Samuel with surprising confidence, supporting the baby's head naturally. Looking at them together, Sarah felt something shift in her chest, a sense of rightness that she had never experienced before. "He is so small," Benjamin marveled. "How can something so small be a whole person?" "I do not know," Sarah said, smiling, "but he is, and he is ours." The word hung in the air between them. Ours, not mine or yours, but ours. Benjamin looked up from the baby to meet Sarah's eyes. "Sarah, I need to tell you something," he said. "I've been trying not to say anything because I did not want to take advantage of your situation, but I cannot keep it inside anymore." Sarah's heart began to race. "What is it?" "I love you," Benjamin said simply. "I have loved you for weeks now, maybe from the moment I caught you on the porch. I know the timing is terrible, and you probably do not feel the same way, but I needed you to know. You and Samuel, you are my family now, not because I feel obligated, but because I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks, but she was smiling. "You foolish, wonderful man. I love you too. I have been in love with you for so long I cannot remember when it started. But I was afraid to say anything, afraid you would think I was trying to trap you or take advantage of your kindness." Benjamin carefully placed Samuel in the cradle that Mrs. Anderson had set up beside the bed, then returned to Sarah's side. He took her hand in both of his, raising it to his lips. "Marry me," he said. "Make it real and permanent. Let me be a father to Samuel and a husband to you. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that you will never have to beg again, for anything." "Yes," Sarah whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Benjamin leaned down and kissed her, gentle and reverent, a promise of everything to come. When he pulled back, both of them were crying and smiling at the same time. "When?" Benjamin asked. "Whenever you are ready. Tomorrow, next month, next year, soon," Sarah replied. "As soon as I am well enough. I do not want to wait any more. I have spent too much of my life waiting for my real life to begin. I want to start now." Mrs. Anderson returned to find them still holding hands, still lost in each other's eyes. She smiled knowingly but said nothing, simply shooed Benjamin out so Sarah could rest. Over the next few weeks, as Sarah recovered her strength and Samuel grew plumper and more alert, plans were made. They would marry in the small church in Montana City, with Tom and Jack as witnesses. It would be a simple ceremony, but Sarah did not care about grandeur. She cared about the man who would be standing beside her, the man who had taken in a desperate stranger and given her everything. The wedding took place on a crisp November morning with the first snow of winter dusting the ground. Sarah wore a dress of soft green that Benjamin had ordered specially from a seamstress in town. He wore his best suit, and Sarah thought she had never seen a more handsome man. Samuel, now 6 weeks old, slept peacefully in Mrs. Anderson's arms as the preacher spoke the words that would bind Sarah and Benjamin together. When Benjamin slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, Sarah felt the last of her fears fall away. She was no longer alone. She was no longer the woman begging for shelter. She was Sarah Kane, beloved wife and mother, a woman with a future as bright as the Montana sky. The kiss that sealed their vows was deeper than the gentle one they had shared in her bedroom, full of passion and promise. The small gathering cheered, and Tom produced a flask for toasting. They celebrated with a meal at the town's only restaurant, and Sarah could not stop smiling. That night, back at the ranch that was now truly her home, Benjamin carried her over the threshold in the traditional way. Samuel was sleeping in his cradle in what had been Sarah's room, but was now being converted into a nursery. Benjamin and Sarah had moved into the larger bedroom upstairs, the one he had been using. "Are you nervous?" Benjamin asked as they stood together in their bedroom. "A little," Sarah admitted. "It has been a long time since I was with anyone, and before that there was only Robert. I do not have much experience." Benjamin cupped her face in his hands. "Neither do I, truly. We will learn together. And if you are too tired, or if you would rather wait, I will understand. There is no rush." But Sarah shook her head. "I do not want to wait. I want my wedding night to be everything it should be. I want to be your wife in every way." They came together slowly, tenderly, Benjamin treating her like something precious and fragile. He unlaced her dress with patient fingers, kissing each new bit of exposed skin. Sarah had worried that he might be put off by her body, still soft and changed from pregnancy, but his reverence was unmistakable. "You are so beautiful," he murmured against her skin. They made love by lamplight, learning each other's bodies, finding what brought pleasure and what brought joy. It was nothing like Sarah's experiences with Robert, which had been hurried and somewhat clumsy. This was a conversation without words, a giving and receiving that left them both breathless and complete. Afterward, Sarah lay in Benjamin's arms, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow to normal. "I never thought I could be this happy," she confessed. "When I was walking that road in August, I thought my life was over. I thought the best I could hope for was survival." Benjamin's arms tightened around her. "You gave me back my life too," he said. "This house was just a building before you came. Now it is a home. I was just going through the motions of living. Now I have a reason to wake up every morning." They fell asleep tangled together, and when Samuel's cries woke them in the small hours, they rose together. Benjamin watched as Sarah nursed their son, his expression soft in the dim light. "Our son," he said wonderingly. "I know he is not my blood, but he feels like mine." "He is yours," Sarah said firmly. "In every way that matters, you are his father, Benjamin." As autumn turned to winter, their little family settled into a rhythm. Samuel grew and thrived, a happy baby who smiled easily. Benjamin proved to be a devoted father, rising in the night to walk a fussy Samuel, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just watching the baby sleep. Christmas came, and they decorated the house with pine boughs and strings of popcorn. Benjamin carved a small wooden horse for Samuel, even though the baby was too young to play with it yet. "For when he is older," Benjamin explained, setting it carefully on a shelf. "I want to make him a whole set of animals." Sarah gave Benjamin a new hat she had knitted herself, working on it in stolen moments when he was outside. He wore it constantly, even though it was slightly lopsided. Tom and Jack joined them for Christmas dinner, and the house rang with laughter and conversation. Sarah looked around the table and marveled at how much her life had changed. A year ago, she had been alone and afraid. Now she was surrounded by people who cared about her, protected by a man who loved her, blessed with a child who would grow up safe and wanted. Winter eased into spring, and the ranch came alive with new calves and green grass. Samuel learned to roll over, then to sit up, his dark eyes following his father everywhere. Benjamin taught him to clap his hands and make silly sounds, and Sarah would watch them together with a heart so full it almost hurt. One evening in late April, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Benjamin cleared his throat nervously. "I have been thinking," he said. "How would you feel about giving Samuel a brother or sister?" Sarah turned to look at him, surprised. "You want more children?" "I want a dozen children if we are blessed with them," Benjamin replied. "I love being a father. I love watching Samuel grow. And I think you are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen when you are holding a baby." Sarah laughed and moved closer to him on the bench. "I would love more children, though perhaps not a dozen, maybe 3 or 4. "Whatever you want," Benjamin said, pulling her close. "I just want to build a life with you, however that looks." Their second child, a daughter, was born the following February. They named her Grace, and she had Benjamin's blue eyes and Sarah's brown hair. Samuel, now 18 months old, was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. 2 years after that, another son arrived whom they named Henry, and 3 years after that, another daughter, Elizabeth. Their house grew crowded and noisy and full of love. Through it all, Benjamin remained the steady, loving man Sarah had fallen in love with that long ago autumn. He expanded the ranch, building their security and legacy. He was patient with the children, firm but kind. And he never stopped looking at Sarah like she was the most precious thing in his world. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they stood on the same porch where Sarah had first collapsed into Benjamin's arms. Samuel, now nearly 11, was helping Tom with the horses. Grace was 7, Henry 5, and Elizabeth just 2. The sound of their children playing drifted across the yard. "You ever regret it?" Sarah asked softly. "Taking in a desperate, pregnant stranger, tying yourself to someone with such a complicated past?" Benjamin pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Every decision I have made since the day I caught you on these steps has been the right one. You and our children are the best parts of my life. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." "I love you, Benjamin Kane," Sarah said, turning in his arms to look up at him. "I love you, Sarah Kane," he replied. "And I promise you again, as I promised you that first day, you will never have to beg again. Not for shelter, not for food, not for love. Everything I have is yours for as long as we both live." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and Sarah lost herself in the moment. In the distance, she could hear their children laughing, hear the cattle lowing, hear the wind moving through the grass. These were the sounds of home, the sounds of safety, the sounds of a life she had thought was impossible. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growing children. Samuel grew tall and strong, with a natural gift for working with horses. He was quiet like his mother, thoughtful and kind. Benjamin taught him everything about running a ranch, and it was clear the boy would take over the operation someday. Grace was spirited and fearless, always climbing trees and racing her brothers. She had her father's determination and her mother's quick mind. Henry was the peacemaker, gentle and empathetic, always concerned when someone was upset. And Elizabeth, the baby, had everyone wrapped around her little finger, a charmer from birth. When Sarah was 35, the doctor told her she could have no more children. A difficult birth with Elizabeth had left complications, and another pregnancy would be dangerous. Sarah grieved privately for the children she would not have, but Benjamin held her through the sadness and reminded her of the blessings they already possessed. 4 healthy, wonderful children, he said. A full, happy life. We have been given more than most people ever dream of. That is enough. That is more than enough. And it was. Sarah poured her love into the children they had, into making a home that would nurture them. She taught Grace and Elizabeth to read and do sums, taught them to bake and sew and stand up for themselves. She taught Samuel and Henry to treat women with respect, to be honest and hardworking, to measure success not by wealth but by the quality of their character. The children grew and thrived, and before Sarah knew it, Samuel was 17 and talking about a girl in town. Grace was 13 and already breaking hearts. Henry was 11 and had announced his intention to become a teacher. Elizabeth was 8 and was raising an orphaned foal with single-minded devotion. Sarah looked in the mirror one morning and saw gray threading through her brown hair, lines around her eyes that came from years of smiling. She was 40 years old, no longer the desperate young woman who had stumbled onto this ranch begging for help. She was a wife, a mother, a pillar of the small community that had grown up around Montana City, and she was happy. Deeply, thoroughly happy. Benjamin, aged 2, his dark hair going silver at the temples, his face weathering from years in the sun. But he was still strong, still capable, still the man who made Sarah's heart skip when he smiled at her across a crowded room. On a summer evening when Sarah was 42, she and Benjamin took a rare moment alone, riding out to a favorite spot on the ranch where a creek ran through a stand of cottonwoods. They dismounted and sat on the bank, their feet dangling in the cool water. "Samuel asked to marry Lucy Miller," Benjamin said. "He wanted my blessing." Sarah smiled. "Did you give it?" "Of course. She is a good girl from a good family, and he loves her the way I love you, like she is the air he breathes. How could I say no to that?" "He is so young," Sarah said, though she knew 18 was not unusual for marrying on the frontier. "So were we," Benjamin reminded her. "You were 23, I was 28, young enough to grow together, to build a life from nothing. We did build something wonderful, did we not?" Sarah said, looking around at the land they had cultivated, the legacy they were creating. "We did," Benjamin agreed. "And we are not done yet. We have years ahead of us, Sarah. Years to watch our children marry and have children of their own, years to grow old together." He leaned over and kissed her, and even after all these years, Sarah still felt that spark, that connection that had bound them together from the beginning. Samuel married Lucy the following spring in a ceremony that was much grander than his parents' simple wedding had been. The whole territory seemed to turn out for it, a testament to the respect the Kane family had earned over the years. Sarah cried as she watched her son pledge his life to his bride, remembering her own wedding day, remembering how far they had all come. Benjamin squeezed her hand, his own eyes suspiciously bright. A year later, Lucy gave birth to a son, and Sarah became a grandmother at 44. Holding her grandson for the first time, feeling the weight of him in her arms, brought back a flood of memories. She remembered holding Samuel just like this, remembered the fear and uncertainty, remembered Benjamin's steady presence. "What will you name him?" she asked Samuel and Lucy. "Benjamin Robert," Samuel replied, looking at his father. "Benjamin for my father, the best man I know. And Robert for my biological father, who I never knew but who gave me life." Sarah looked at Benjamin and saw tears streaming down his face. He stood abruptly and walked out of the room, overcome with emotion. Sarah followed him, finding him on the porch with his head in his hands. "Benjamin," she said softly. He looked up at her, his face wet. "I never imagined that he would, that anyone would." Sarah sat beside him and took his hand. "You are his father in every way that counts. He knows that. We all know that." "I loved him from the moment I saw him," Benjamin said hoarsely. "That tiny, red-faced baby that was not even mine, I loved him instantly. And every day since, he has made me proud. Seeing him become a man, a husband, a father himself, it is the greatest gift of my life." They held each other on the porch, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a family and a legacy from nothing but love and determination. The years rolled on. Grace married a young rancher from a neighboring spread and moved just 10 miles away. She had 3 children in quick succession, and proved to be as spirited and fearless a mother as she had been a daughter. Henry did indeed become a teacher, moving to Virginia City to work at the school there. He married a quiet woman who shared his love of books and learning, and they had 2 daughters who were shy and sweet. Elizabeth, true to form, married the most unexpected person, a traveling photographer who came through Montana City documenting the changing West. She traveled with him for several years before they settled back on a small piece of land Benjamin gave them, raising their children to appreciate both roots and adventure. By the time Sarah was 50, she had 12 grandchildren, with more on the way. The ranch house that had once seemed so large was constantly full of children and noise and laughter. Benjamin added on to it twice, creating more space for family gatherings. On quiet evenings, when it was just the two of them again, Sarah and Benjamin would sit on the porch and watch the sunset, hands clasped together. "Did you ever imagine this?" Sarah asked one evening. "All of this when you pulled me off that porch 25 years ago?" Benjamin was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I imagined helping you, giving you a safe place to have your baby. I imagined maybe becoming friends. But this? A lifetime of love, 4 children, a dozen grandchildren, a legacy that will outlive us. No, I could not have imagined this. It is better than any dream I could have had." "You saved my life," Sarah said softly. "You know that, do not you? I would have died on that road if you had not taken me in." "You saved mine too," Benjamin replied. "I was just existing before you came, going through the motions. You gave me a reason to live, a purpose beyond just running a ranch. You gave me everything that matters." As they aged into their 50s and then their 60s, their love only deepened. They knew each other completely, could communicate with just a look, moved through their days in comfortable synchronicity. They weathered losses together. The death of Tom from old age, a drought that tested but did not break them. The grief of watching some of their grandchildren move away to seek fortunes elsewhere. But they weathered the joys too. More grandchildren, the ranch's continued prosperity, the pride of watching their children succeed in their own lives. Samuel took over most of the day-to-day operations of the ranch, though Benjamin still helped when he could. Lucy became like another daughter to Sarah, and they spent hours together preserving food and sewing quilts for the endless stream of grandchildren. When Sarah was 68, she fell ill with pneumonia. For a week, Benjamin barely left her side, spooning broth into her mouth, bathing her fevered skin, praying harder than he had ever prayed in his life. The doctor warned him to prepare for the worst, but Benjamin refused to accept that. "You promised me," he whispered to Sarah during one of her lucid moments. "You promised me we would grow old together. You do not get to break that promise now." Sarah squeezed his hand weakly. "I am not done yet," she managed to say. "We still have years ahead of us," and she was right. She rallied, slowly regaining her strength, and by spring she was back to her usual self, if a bit more fragile. Benjamin was more protective than ever, always making sure she did not overexert herself. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren, the house bursting at the seams with family. Samuel made a speech about the example his parents had set, about the power of love and commitment. Sarah cried happy tears, and Benjamin held her close. As the party wound down and the family dispersed to various bedrooms and the bunkhouse and tents pitched in the yard, Sarah and Benjamin found themselves alone on the porch once again, their favorite spot. 40 years, Sarah marveled. It seems like yesterday and forever ago at the same time. "The best 40 years of my life," Benjamin said. He pulled a small box from his pocket and handed it to her. "I wanted to give you something to mark the occasion." Sarah opened the box to find a delicate gold locket. Inside were tiny photographs, one of them on their wedding day, one of all 4 of their children as young adults. "Benjamin, this is beautiful," Sarah breathed. He fastened it around her neck. "I wanted you to have something to carry our family with you always. Though I suppose you already carry them in your heart." "Always," Sarah agreed. "Just as I carry you." They were 72 and 67 when Benjamin had a stroke while working in the barn. Samuel found him and got him to the house, and the doctor came immediately. Benjamin survived but was left weakened on one side. For the first time in their marriage, Sarah became the caretaker, helping him relearn to walk, to use his left hand, to accept his new limitations. Benjamin chafed at his weakness, frustrated by his body's betrayal. But Sarah was patient and loving, just as he had been with her through every difficulty. "We are a team," she reminded him when he apologized for the 100th time for being a burden. "We have always been a team. You took care of me when I needed it. Now I take care of you. That is what love is." It took months, but Benjamin regained much of his strength and mobility. He would never be quite the same, but he could walk with a cane, could still ride a horse if he was careful. And most importantly, he could still hold Sarah, still kiss her, still tell her every day that he loved her. They were fortunate in their old age to have their children nearby and involved. Samuel and Lucy had built a house on the ranch property and were raising their children there. Grace visited weekly, often staying for days at a time. Henry came for holidays and important occasions, his daughters doting on their grandparents. Elizabeth and her photographer husband had settled permanently near Montana City, and their children were frequent visitors. At 76 and 71, Sarah and Benjamin still had their evening ritual of sitting on the porch and watching the sunset. They moved slower now, needed help from their children more often than they liked to admit, but they were still together, still in love, still grateful for every day. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Sarah asked one evening, the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Which part?" Benjamin asked, his voice still strong despite his age. "You said I would never have to beg again," Sarah replied. "And you were right. From that moment on, I never wanted for anything. Not shelter, not food, not love. You gave me everything I could ever need." "You gave me more than I gave you," Benjamin argued gently. "You gave me a family, you gave me purpose, you gave me a reason to be better than I was." "We gave each other everything," Sarah said softly. "That is the truth of it. We saved each other." Benjamin raised her hand to his lips and kissed it, a gesture he had repeated thousands of times over the decades but which never lost its power to move her. "I love you, Sarah Kane," he said. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you, Benjamin Kane," Sarah replied. "My savior, my husband, my heart." The sunset faded to twilight, and they sat together in comfortable silence. Two souls who had found each other in the wilderness and built a life more beautiful than either could have imagined. Around them, their legacy lived and breathed in the form of children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in the ranch they had built, in the love that would outlast them both. Benjamin Kane passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 81, with Sarah holding his hand and their children surrounding the bed. His last words were a whisper that only Sarah heard. "Thank you for saying yes." Sarah grieved deeply, but she was comforted by the knowledge that she had been blessed with 53 years of marriage to the best man she had ever known. She lived another 4 years, surrounded by family, telling stories of the early days to grandchildren and great-grandchildren who were fascinated by the tale of how their grandparents met. She passed away on a summer evening, sitting on the porch watching the sunset, much as she and Benjamin had done thousands of times. Samuel found her there, peaceful and still, a smile on her aged face. In her hand was the locket Benjamin had given her, clutched close to her heart. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath 2 cottonwood trees. The simple headstones read, "Benjamin Kane, beloved husband and father, and Sarah Kane, beloved wife and mother," but their true legacy was not in stone markers. It lived in the ranch that still bore the Kane name 3 generations later. It lived in the dozens of descendants who carried their blood and their values. It lived in the story that became family legend, of a pregnant woman who begged for shelter, and a rancher who gave her a home and said, "You will never beg again," and in doing so, found his own salvation. Their love story became the foundation on which generations were built, proof that sometimes the greatest loves begin not with grand gestures or perfect circumstances, but with simple kindness shown to someone in desperate need. And sometimes, in saving someone else, we save ourselves.